Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
I'm going to now introduce Sarah Daniels, our final speaker. Maria will not be joining us tonight. Okay.
You're frozen, Deb. We can't hear you. I'm not sure what's happened to your line, but you're frozen.
I wonder whether I should take over now. Will it switch to me if I just talk?
It has switched to you, Sarah,
okay.
so maybe you
All
can...
right, it's okay, I can introduce myself. Okay, so my name is Sarah Daniels and I am a psychologist in Melbourne, and I specialise mostly in trauma work and also in relationship counselling. And today I'm really going to focus my talk around, I think I called it Unlocking Being Relationally Connected. So it's really great to be here with such an international community focused on transformational change and being connected to each other and to our earth. And, you know, every day we wake up and there's something that's shaking our world. And mostly we hear about all the negative stuff. It's so lovely to have a platform like this where we can gather and we can hear and we can work together on positive change. I've just heard, you know, Kylie talking about neurological wiring and intention, and Soraya talking about thinking and the mind and subconscious patterns, going, yay, because they're the things I'm going to be talking about, except I'm going to be talking about them a little bit more in the framework of being relationally connected. I'm hoping to stimulate your mind with some interesting information, but more importantly, get you thinking about and doing things to improve your connections in your relationships. So this is particularly relevant in more recent times as the lockdowns and the isolation have been frontline tools in slowing down the pandemic. And we know that the lack of relational connections impacts negatively on our physical and our mental health and puts people at greater risk of depression and anxiety. In the last few years, the people of the world have been having a crash course and a reminder in how important our relationships really are. It reminded me of the movie Castaway. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but Tom Hanks, he was marooned on a deserted island. And in his loneliness, towards the end of the movie, he made, actually the beginning of the movie, he made a best friend out of a soccer ball because he needed a companion. But in the end, he was prepared to risk death in the ocean to escape loneliness and to be reunited with people. Over the last 18 months, we have been so inspired by the drive that we've all had to connect. You know, we've had musicians playing to people locked in apartments. We've had online concerts and classes, people writing to strangers, Zoom parties, cocktail parties. Every community across the world has found creative ways to connect to those around them and the people they care for. But in the last round of lockdowns, and, you know, it's just been so difficult for people to stay as connected as we talk about people having lockdown fatigue. And it's really been such a struggle for our bodies over the last 18 months. Been stressed, our sympathetic nervous systems have been working in overtime. Our minds and our bodies are exhausted. And it's really difficult to bounce back. And today, as we are sitting here all talking together, there are some countries that are coming out of lockdown and there's others that are going into lockdowns. It's really important with lockdown fatigue that we shake off the disconnection and connect with others, because relational connection is just as important as to survive as our air and our food and our safety. In the 168 hours of our week, we are either awake or asleep, and our brains through that whole time are very busy constantly solidifying our neurological wiring that you've been installing and consolidating over the course of your whole life. I want you to imagine that your brain is like a house, and your survival is based on strengthening and occasionally adding new wires to provide the best neurological flow to ensure your house always runs smoothly. From a young age, we have learned that survival is based on creating individual safety and protection. Our prime directive is safety, and we tune into that above everything else. But we were not born master electricians, and we've unfortunately made many errors in creating our own wiring masterpiece, as Kylie did a brilliant job of showing us earlier. So it's not my purpose today to uncover all of the wiring, but to get you thinking about the wiring which pertains to your relationships. For even though individual safety is a prime directive, modern science is learning more and more that we have a second prime directive for survival. We are wired to be relationally connected. In fact, the first thing that we do when we come into the world, other than take our first breath, is to look for connection. We know on an instinctive level we need it, and we're soothed by that first arms that hold us and the voice that we hear and the smells. A huge amount of our learned experience is about our engagement with others. And unfortunately, with our brain wired for survival, focusing on the negative components of these relationships over the positive ones, feeling rejected, unloved, unworthy, not important, experiencing some type of physical or emotional abuse, seeing and watching arguments, seeing and watching people being denigrated and put down. These are just a few examples of our negative wiring that gets entrenched in us about our relationships. We filter our current experiences through our wiring, and this often results in relationship disconnection in an attempt to find safety. So as we go, we learn to go on the attack, or we become defensive, or we shut down as we react to others during many of our difficult interpersonal conflicts. We've been having a crash course during COVID on how important our relationships really are. For those who live alone, there's been an absence of all those little incidental connections. You know, chatting with a colleague, getting a coffee, talking to the barista, and all those planned connections. And so there's been this isolation and loneliness. For those who live with others, many people have got a crash course in how badly they've been connected to the people they live with. That could be felt like an absence of a relationship or a feeling of loneliness, even when you're in the presence of other people. Or a jarring, unpleasant, and even very distressing connection, signalling that these relationships are struggling and are disconnected. For many, there's been a rolling up of the sleeves, an application of focused attention to improve these relationships because, after all, in lockdown, you're stuck together in the same house day after day. I'm sure that many of these attempts to improve connection have been successful. However, many more haven't. When our brains are wiring is primarily functioning to create and maintain individual safety, our relationships suffer. And we now know that relationships are also necessary for survival. So we find ourselves reaching for connection using wiring that's been hardwired for individual protection, incorporating past negative relational constructs and expectations of others. No wonder that connecting to others is so difficult. So how can we start connecting to individuals that are important to our lives? One of the important ways is to focus on creating experiences that strengthen our wiring for connection. And as Kylie pointed out earlier, with her 60 days of focusing on internal dialogue, what she's doing is rewiring the brain. We want to rewire the brain also for our connection to others, as well as with ourselves. So let's recap. Our brain has been wired for individual protection and safety and not focused enough on the wiring for connection, even though it's essential for survival. The most powerful way to rewire for connection is by having positive experiences, positive relational experiences. Now I want you to take a minute to think of someone in your life who's really important to you. It could be a parent, a sibling, a friend, a companion, a child. I want you to allow yourself to focus on an experience with that person that makes you feel good when you think about them. Their smile, something they did that was funny or quirky, something nice about them, something they do for you, how you feel when you're with them, a favourite thing you do together. Really allow yourself to feel what it's like to imagine that experience. What's the emotion? Contentment, joy, peace, warmth. Really allow it to fill you. Now I want you to imagine that you're reaching for that person for connection. How would you do this? A phone call? If you're a bit younger than me, it might be Instagram or Snapchat. A text message. Perhaps see yourself walking home, greeting that person, walking in the front door. What would the expression on your face be? Would you seek out that person and make eye contact? And what would you say? Is the underlying message, hey, I see you and you are important to me? We have these really cool things in our brain, and I'm sure you've probably heard of them before. They're called mirror neurons. First discovered in the 1980s by some neuroscientists studying monkeys. And they found that when we do something like picking up a cup, an observer watching us will have the same neurons firing in their brain, kind of creating an inner experience of that activity. More recently, research expanding on this has focused on how we communicate our intentions and our feelings. We're finding that when I see you smile, my mirror neurons for smiling will light up and evoke a feeling associated with smiling. Not only do our brains fire off in imitation of others, but it often results in a similar behaviour. Have you ever noticed that when you're out for a drink with friends and you pick up your drink seconds after the other person has picked up their drink? Or you lean into the conversation just after your friend has leaned in to say something to you? When your kids, if you have any, and I'm sure that they've got nits at some point, when you focus on those little critters crawling around in their head, you suddenly start to feel that your head is really itchy. There are so many examples that we've never really paid attention to, where these magical mirror neurons are in action. Mirror neurons in themselves are designed to improve survival in communication and assist in learning. They can act positively, helping us convey, comprehending emotions. It aids with observational learning and empathy. It helps create an environment of safety and connection. But on the flip side, mirror neurons can also contribute to the decline of a relationship by enhancing negative states. So we have this really powerful tool in our brain, which we use daily without understanding or without having conscious awareness of what we're doing. We're creating as we go without any intention. So what would happen if you were intentionally focused on relational connection rather than on our automatic neurological wiring of our brain? Not only would the other person be more likely to respond to you positively as you respond to them positively, but you would be internally busy in your brain wiring more for connection rather than disconnection. What an amazing thing if we could all be more intentional on working how we reach for the other person. Having more positive experiences, our brain would not focus so much on safety and protection. Now, I want you to take a minute to think about the reality of what your connections with this important person in your life have been like over the last month. Can you say that you've been intentionally connecting? Have you been disconnected or behaving in a manner that promotes disconnection, such as speaking unkindly? Not really being present in the conversation, you're busy thinking about something else. The act of connecting is in the moment. It is in the present. A relational moment often represents in microcosmic the whole relationship. What have your moments of connection looked like? In a relationship fraught by disconnection, it is difficult to have moments of real, authentic relational connection. As people will keep parts of themselves out of the relationship that don't feel safe in order to make connection. So remember, as you're reflecting on this important relationship that you have and your connections, this is not about them or their behaviour. This is about you. And as you reflect, I want you to be kind. This is not about berating yourself or putting yourself down. It's about stepping away from your brain's automatic firing and looking at yourself honestly to explore and promote positive change in your relationships, rather than continue to run the same neurological wiring like a hamster wheel. So what could you be doing differently now with greater understanding of your brain's wiring? How could you behave more consciously to promote positive change and positive connections in your relationships? Just a small change every day, a small moment of being intentional when you see that important person or even a stranger. Just that moment of intentional about the way you're connecting. I hope that you'll go away from this small period of time with me and having a bit of a glimpse into the brain, that it will help you be more motivated to be relationally connected. Thank you for your time. I'm hoping our narrator's back to take over.
She is indeed. Thank you.
She is indeed. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you. you. Yeah, that was weird. Thankfully, Marianne carried over there for a bit, but thank you for a powerful message. I was actually able to get in for most of it. I had not heard of the mirror neurons. That's really interesting. I mean, knowing, it makes sense how you learn, and we certainly learn by mimicking. I mean, animals learn by mimicking. Not heard that term. And it's really good to hear in relation to relationships, speaking about changing the neural pathways and what are the subtle things that we can do. I appreciate how you've brought some of those things to light today. I really do. I want to share, there is your certificate of appreciation, and that will be emailed to you.